It was a Tuesday night, October 17th, 1967. The air inside Small's Paradise on 7th Avenue, Harlem, usually a velvet cloak woven with the rich threads of jazz and laughter, felt stretched thin, taut as a piano wire. Every clink of a glass, every hushed conversation, seemed to echo too loudly in the sudden, palpable silence that had fallen over the room. 9 years. That's how long it had been since anyone in Bumpy Johnson's inner circle had laid eyes on Arthur "Artie" Klein. Artie, Bumpy's meticulous numbers-crunching accountant, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a gaping hole in Bumpy's intricate operations. But tonight, Artie wasn't just back. He was seated at Table 7. Table 7, a sacred space. It was the table traditionally reserved for Bumpy Johnson himself, or for those granted an urgent, prearranged audience with the undisputed godfather of Harlem. This wasn't an accident. This was a statement. The whispers, usually a low hum of gossip and business, had intensified, transforming into a collective gasp that held its breath. Everyone in that room, from the hardened enforcers to the stylish dames, expected a violent reckoning, a public execution of trust paid in blood. But Bumpy Johnson rarely played the hand anyone expected. The true mystery, the impossible outcome no one dared voice, was that the silence at Table 7 would be far more devastating than any gunshot. Because some debts, you see, are never paid in cash. To understand what unfolded that night, you have to first grasp the delicate, dangerous ecosystem that was Harlem in the mid-1960s and the man who stood at its apex. This wasn't just about a returning accountant. It was about the very fabric of power, respect, and loyalty in a world where those commodities were bought and sold with lethal currency. Bumpy Johnson was a name whispered with reverence and dread from Lenox Avenue to Sugar Hill. His reputation wasn't built solely on ruthlessness, though he possessed it in spades. It was built on an almost supernatural foresight, an unyielding code, and a strategic mind that made him less a gangster and more a chess master. His power lay in his intellect as much as his muscle. His danger wasn't merely his capacity for violence, but his memory, his vast, intricate network, and his absolute refusal to tolerate disrespect. Then there was Artie Klein, the human pivot around whom this silent drama revolved. He was brilliant with numbers, a savant with ledgers that detailed every illicit dollar Bumpy ever touched. Yet, he was fatally flawed by a desperate ambition to escape the shadow of the streets and a crippling fear of Bumpy's notoriously long reach. His greatest weakness, the one that would prove his undoing, was his naive belief that time and distance could somehow erase a debt of knowledge. He thought 9 years was long enough. He was wrong. The true antagonist in this unfolding tragedy wasn't a single rival boss, but the shifting, treacherous tides of power in New York's underworld. New blood, eager to make their mark, and established syndicates, always looking for an advantage, saw Bumpy's advancing age as an opportunity to chip away at his Harlem empire. They viewed Artie Klein as a pawn, a potential source of leverage, or at the very least, a public challenge to Bumpy's authority. Their objective was simple: control Bumpy's lucrative numbers racket and his iron grip over the docks. Harlem in the 60s was a powder keg, primed to explode. The numbers game remained king, a steady stream of illicit revenue, but heroin was creeping in, bringing with it new, more brutal players who didn't respect the old ways. Bumpy had always maintained a delicate balance, an uneasy truce with the Italian families, ensuring Harlem remained his sovereign domain. But respect in this world was a daily negotiation, and a perceived weakness, a single crack in the facade, could unravel decades of carefully constructed order. What was truly at stake wasn't just money, it was Bumpy's reputation, the stability of his entire territory, and the very idea that a man could walk away from Bumpy Johnson and live a normal life. Artie's return wasn't just personal, it was an existential threat. The initial tremor, the first hint of the approaching storm, began to coalesce months before Artie Klein ever set foot back in Small's Paradise. Whispers, like tendrils of smoke, began to reach Bumpy through his vast network. Artie Klein, supposedly living a quiet, legitimate life upstate, working for a construction firm, was seen making discreet trips to the city. He was meeting with figures directly tied to the Genovese family. It seemed Artie, under pressure or enticed by new promises, was being groomed. Perhaps as an informant, perhaps as a symbol, a living testament to Bumpy's supposed waning control. The trap felt inevitable. Any other man might have sent enforcers, acted with swift, brutal finality. But Bumpy, as always, was already 3 moves ahead. He didn't send muscle. He sent observers. His network, a tapestry woven from old loyalties and street-level intelligence, began to meticulously piece together Artie's movements, his clandestine meetings, the subtle signs of his fear, and the undeniable glint of his ambition. Artie's small error wasn't a misstep in his new life, a forgotten detail in a ledger. His fundamental misunderstanding lay in his underestimation of Bumpy's patience, his belief that his past was buried deep enough. He was unaware that Bumpy had been quietly tending its grave for 9 long years, waiting for the precise, opportune moment to exhume it. And that moment was tonight. The evening at Small's Paradise was Bumpy's stage, and Artie Klein, unknowingly, was the star of a silent, devastating performance. The iconic element, the silent messenger of doom that solidified the club's fear, was a perfectly folded linen napkin. It lay pristine, untouched, at Artie's setting at table 7. A stark, almost clinical contrast to the casual chaos of the club, it was a symbol of an order that Artie had once been part of, and by which he was now about to be judged. The jazz played on, a mournful, soulful backdrop, as Bumpy Johnson made his way across the room. He didn't come with a retinue of toughs, no visible display of force. He walked alone, a quiet nod to the bandleader, a knowing, almost imperceptible glance at the bartender, whose eyes betrayed a lifetime of witnessing such moments. Bumpy reached table 7. He pulled out the chair opposite Artie, the movement slow, deliberate, each sound amplified in the profound quiet that had now descended upon the entire club. The napkin lay between them, a pristine white flag of surrender, waiting to be unfurled. And then Bumpy sat. Bumpy sat. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, his gaze, heavy with the weight of years and untold secrets, settled on Artie Klein. It was a silence that swallowed the ambient hum of the club, a vacuum of sound where only the frantic beating of Artie's own heart could be heard. The perfectly folded linen napkin, pristine and stark white, lay between them, an almost surgical instrument of judgment. It represented the meticulous order Artie had once been part of, the very ledgers he had once so carefully balanced, and the unforgiving balance sheet he was about to face. When Bumpy finally spoke, his voice was a low, even tone, barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the silence like a razor wire. It was not a shout, not a threat, but a calm, almost conversational delivery that chilled Artie to his core. "Arthur," Bumpy began, his eyes never leaving Artie's, "it's been a long time. 9 years, 6 months and 14 days to be exact. A man could build a whole new life in that time, couldn't he?" Artie, his face a mask of pasty white terror, could only manage a choked sound, a desperate attempt to swallow the fear constricting his throat. He tried to speak, but no words came. Bumpy continued, leaning slightly forward, his voice never rising. "A new life upstate. Lovely little house in Rye, wasn't it? 3 bedrooms, a nice garden. You even put in that new patio last spring, didn't you? Heard your boy Michael got into Columbia. Pre-med, bright kid, always was." Each detail, delivered with casual precision, was a hammer blow. Artie's eyes, wide with a dawning horror, darted around the club, searching for an escape, for a sign that this was a nightmare. But the faces around them, frozen in silent observation, offered no comfort. They were all witnesses. The information Bumpy shared wasn't public knowledge. It was intimate, private, the kind of data only a man living Artie's new life or someone with an utterly pervasive network could possess. Bumpy smiled, a slow, humorless curve of his lips. "And that construction firm, Klein & Sons Development. Very legitimate, but you know, Arthur, the ledgers, they still speak to me even after all these years." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, thick and suffocating. "Remember the numbers racket, Artie. Always precise, always balanced. Except, of course, for the 212,000, $457 you managed to divert over a period of 18 months before you decided to take a sabbatical. Artie flinched as if struck. The exact figure, down to the last dollar, was a devastating blow. It wasn't an accusation, it was a simple, undeniable statement of fact. His carefully constructed new identity, his carefully cultivated legitimate existence, was crumbling before his very eyes. But Bumpy wasn't finished. Funny thing, Artie. That money, that $212,000, it was gone, just like you. But some of it, a good chunk, found its way back, right into a certain college fund. For Michael. Columbia isn't cheap, is it? This was the peak, the point of no return. Bumpy hadn't just exposed Artie's past crimes, he had demonstrated an omniscient reach into Artie's present, twisting the very symbol of Artie's escape, his son's future, into an instrument of his public humiliation. The message was clear, chillingly so. Bumpy Johnson knew everything. He had been watching. Every secret Artie thought he had buried, Bumpy had been quietly tending its grave, waiting for the right moment to exhume it. Artie Klein collapsed into himself, his shoulders slumping, his head bowed. There were no shouts, no threats, no bloodshed, just the quiet, devastating revelation of absolute knowledge and control. This wasn't about ending a life, it was about ending a future publicly, without a single drop of blood. It proved beyond any doubt that Bumpy's power transcended brute force. The domino effect was immediate, profound, and merciless. Within 72 hours, the whispers across Harlem confirmed it. Bumpy Johnson was still the king. The story of Artie Klein's silent reckoning at Table 7 spread like wildfire, embellished with each retelling, but the core truth remained. Artie Klein disappeared again, this time for good. His once legitimate construction firm, Klein & Sons Development, collapsed under a sudden, inexplicable cloud of undisclosed debts and immediate, untraceable withdrawals. Licenses were revoked, contracts vanished, and the carefully built life Artie had envisioned for himself and his family evaporated into thin air. He had no future left to build. The message reached the rival families, particularly the Genovese, loud and clear. Bumpy Johnson was not to be trifled with, and his memory was long. Any plans to use Artie as a wedge, as a symbol of Bumpy's waning control, were abandoned. The unspoken rules of loyalty in the Harlem underworld were reinforced with brutal clarity, and the price of betrayal, even after 9 years, was made terrifyingly, irrevocably clear. The silence at Table 7 had reverberated louder than any gunshot. True power isn't about the loudest threat, it's about the quietest memory. It's about knowing the ledger of every soul you touch and understanding that some debts are never paid in cash. They are paid in fear, in broken futures, in the public disintegration of a life built on sand. Silence, Artie Klein discovered, was never an escape. It was merely a deferred payment, waiting for the right moment to be collected. If this story, this cold, calculating dance of power and memory, caught your attention, then hit that like button. It tells us to keep digging up these forgotten corners of history. And if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to join the ranks of those who understand that history's real lessons are often found in the shadows. Let me know in the comments, was Artie's fate justified, or was Bumpy's revenge too cruel? Share this with someone who needs to understand that some debts follow you to the grave. And make sure your notifications are on, because the next tale from the annals of the underworld is even more insane.